The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
The carnage and suffering in Ukraine is a war that Russia cannot be allowed to win. That, according to Canada's ambassador to the United Nations, Bob Rae. Tonight, he outlines why getting the world working together on this is essential. Then, with the release of the final episode of the TVO podcast Screen Time, we'll hear from featured guest Baroness Kidron on how the bill she championed is helping tame the online world for kids. And as tax time approaches, financial planner Jackie Porter offers some advice for this third COVID tax year. It's Wednesday, April 13th, and that's all ahead on the agenda. Every day, the toll of Russia's attacks on Ukraine becomes more evident and heartbreaking. It is a humanitarian crisis of terrible proportions. It is also, according to Canada's ambassador to the United Nations, an attack on the global order. Bob Rae is our UN ambassador, and he joins us now from Manhattan, New York. Ambassador, it's great to see you again. I want to just start by, asking what somebody like you does at a moment like this. There are countries at war. You're an ambassador of a NATO member. What do you actually do now to try to help?
Well, we talk to as many people as possible. We try to build bridges. We try to establish lines of communication and conversation. And we do our very best to remind everybody that there will be no winners in this thing. There will only be losers. So we have to figure out a way to get to a place where people can start talking about what a settlement might look like. Unfortunately, I have to say that I think that President Putin's comments on the fact that he doesn't see the peace process going anywhere and he's not interested in carrying on, and every indication that we see from our intelligence and any information that the Russians are preparing for some massive military attacks in the east and south of the country are only terrible news, because it's going to mean that we'll see a lot of really bad, dark things happening, as we have over the last 2 or 3 weeks. And it's very tough, but we have to keep trying. And there are lots of other people who are also trying, and that's what we have to do right now.
I understand that you have to keep trying, but do the developments therefore mean that you have different advice for the government of Canada in terms of what we ought to be doing right now? And by that, I mean something tougher.
Well, I think my advice would not be alone. I think there's a lot of people who made it very clear. I noticed that President Biden and Prime Minister Boris Johnson have had some meetings talking about how they have to make sure that Ukraine is getting the equipment that it needs. In our budget last week, Chrystia Freeland announced that we're going to be providing more weaponry to the Ukrainians. Minister Anand is in the UK this week. I'm sure that's part of the conversation. And yes, we need to make sure that Ukraine has the weapons that it needs to be able to defend itself in this terrible act of aggression, which has been launched by President Putin. So we have to keep doing that, but it doesn't mean that you stop listening to whatever you can hear about what possibilities there might be. And at the UN, those kinds of conversations happen pretty well 24 hours a day. We don't get a lot of sleep here, Steve.
Well, you look remarkably good for a guy who hasn't had enough sleep lately. So,
and who's 73 years old, and it's just amazing. I just attended a conference on ageism this afternoon, so I had several things to say about that.
I'll bet. Tell me this, though, and again, as we try to get more insight into what it is that you're able to do right now, do you have a relationship with your counterpart from Russia, and do you talk to him or her on a regular basis? I don't even know. Who is it?
Ambassador Valencia, I haven't talked to him in the last little while. I think our critical conversations with the Russians obviously take place in Moscow. I do have several conversations with people on the Ukrainian side and also at the UN. Really, what we're trying to find out now from the UN is what what kind of dialogue can be held with the Russians to deal with humanitarian matters. And that is a critical conversation which is taking place. The Secretary General has been engaging in those conversations, and I have a good link in with him. I'll be seeing a couple of people at dinner tonight that I hope I'll be able to carry on some good conversations about what more might be done with the it's sort of one of these working dinners that we have from on a regular basis, where we just sit down and talk about what more can we do. And that, I think, there are a lot of missions that have a very key role here. Obviously the United States, the UK, our NATO allies, but also Turkey, which is a country that's had a lot to do with getting the peace talks going and moving. And they have excellent conversations on both sides. We do have a lot of work that's been ongoing with the Ukrainians on what a solution might look like. But I think with the Russians, right now it's more difficult because they've made a determination that they're going to go to war, they're going to stay with the war approach, and that makes it much harder. So you end up saying, okay, that's their decision. Then we have to be prepared to push back very hard on that front. If the Russians are saying our preferred path is not peace, but our preferred path is war, then we have to make sure that the Ukrainians are totally equipped to be able to fight that war effectively.
Okay, I'm going to go on a bit of a limb here, and you tell me if I'm all wet on this. But unlike you, who I think your prime minister listens to, my hunch would be that Vladimir Putin doesn't listen to or care what his UN ambassador is doing or saying to anybody else. He's calling all the shots. So do you have these moments where you think you're talking to a wall when you're talking to your counterpart from Russia?
I don't want to break all lines of communication. So I'm only going to say, I think there's a lot of public commentary about the degree of isolation of the Russian president. I have no other information that would lead me to think otherwise. Let's just leave it at that.
Okay, moving on. You know, of course, that the United Nations has been criticized for decades and decades for what people wish it could do, but hasn't been able to do, or whatever. And part of its job, obviously, is to maintain international peace. And some people are going to say they haven't done a very good job at doing that so far. How would you respond to that?
Well, I think the founders of the UN didn't give it the means to play the role that everybody wants it to play. And that's one of the tragedies of our time, is the UN does not have an army. The UN does not have a military capacity. All the UN can do is persuade. The Secretary General can only do what countries are willing to let him do. And the notion that somehow the United Nations as an institution is going to be able to exercise military force against somebody who's behaving like an aggressor, or is going to somehow be able to magically get people into a room and get them to do a deal, is illusory, because the UN doesn't have military power. It doesn't have the means to force countries to do what would be necessary in the interest of peace. So I get the frustration, but I also think it's fair to say that Richard Holbrooke was right when he said that you don't blame Madison Square Gardens every time the Knicks lose. And I think that's the same thing true of the UN. You don't blame the UN because member states are behaving terribly and because member states are not listening to logic, and member states are going to war. And this is a situation where one member state is carrying out an act of aggression against another, and many, many countries are going to the aid and to the defense of Ukraine in its efforts to withstand this onslaught of the Russian army and the Russian Air Force and the Russian Navy. But the idea that somehow the UN would magically solve this problem is, you say, well, how would you think that would happen? There is a reality here that we have to continually check up against. And that is the reality that the UN has never had the military force behind it that would allow it to enforce a peace. All it can do is rely on member states to supply it with the means to create the peace. And at different times in history, in Korea, when basically the UN, under the leadership of the United States, went to war in order to defend the Republic of Korea. We went into peacekeeping, thanks to Mr. Pearson's initiative, because the United States told the British and the French to back off. And what were you thinking? And told the Israelis the same thing and said, what are you thinking of when you think you can land at Suez Canal and somehow pretend that you're not invading when you are invading? So that was able to be effective. We've been able to keep a truce in Cyprus for the last 50 years, which has kept the two sides apart and kept them from fighting. But I can also list longer than my arm the things that the UN has not been able to do. For example, 2 weeks ago, we were able to bring about a settlement of a ceasefire in Yemen, which has lasted so far. And let's hope it keeps on. But at the same time, we've not been able to stop the fighting in Ukraine. And even a modicum of humanitarian movement of population in order to allow people to get out from under Mariupol, that has not been permitted by the Russians. So we're dealing with a ruthless and sadly permanent member of the Security Council, when the whole purpose of the Security Council and the whole purpose of the permanent membership was that you would have 5 countries that would together agree that they would keep the peace. That was the deal. And that's the deal that the Russians have broken. Russians have not kept the peace. The Russians have become the aggressor. And that's what's caused the war. And that's why we're fighting. That's why, and why it's against the world order is because food prices, food availability, energy prices, energy availability, everything has been shot to hell because of what the Russians have done. And there's going to be massive famines in many parts of the world. There's going to be potentially riots in the street in countries all over the world because you're going to have food prices out of sight. You're going to have energy prices out of sight. And the poorest countries in the world are going to be devastated by the impact of what the Russians have done. What they've done is criminal.
Well, let me pick up on that because there's tremendous support for Ukraine right now, particularly in the West. But one wonders how long or how deep that support will last if, in fact, food prices double, if, in fact, the price of gasoline continues to go up. How concerned are you about that?
Well, it's not Ukraine's fault. I mean, Ukraine has been attacked. They're not cutting. I mean, they can't get their products to market because the Russians are blocking it on the Black Sea. They can't plant their seeds which are vital for food production all over the Middle East and all over North Africa and many other parts of the world. They can't do it because the Russians are preventing the farmers from planting seeds. There's a war going on. But it's not a war that's been created or caused or initiated by Ukraine. It's a war that has been created and caused by Russia. There's only one country that's responsible for this conflict.
Mm-hmm. Let me just circle back to something you said a moment ago when you did say that there were many countries that were going to bat for Ukraine right now. And I hasten to point out there are many countries that have not gone to bat for Ukraine right now. I note that barely any countries in Asia have supported the sanctions regime. I don't know that any countries in Africa are supporting sanctions. I don't know that very many countries in Latin America are supporting sanctions. Why do you think it seems to be at the moment just the West, and certainly NATO countries, but mostly the West, that have been prepared to do this, and much of the rest of the world has not got on board?
I think that's a little overdone. We got 140 votes in favor of the 2 resolutions that clearly analyze the cause of the conflict.
That called Russia the aggressor, but that are not participating in sanctions. You haven't got 140 countries on sanctions.
No, that's correct. That's true, and there are very real reasons for that. Some of them are very poor. Some of them are very vulnerable. Some of them are either partly financially or otherwise dependent on Russia or on China. And I think that behind the scenes, China has not been particularly helpful with a number of countries in warning them that if they go too far in terms of joining with the coalition against Russia, that there's going to be a problem. But look, I mean, this is not new. This is not dramatically different from anything we've seen before. There are a great many countries that don't like sanctions. There are a great many countries that are reluctant to participate in them. They don't participate in sanctions. on Iran. They don't participate in sanctions on Myanmar. They don't participate in sanctions on many countries where the West has come to the conclusion that short of military intervention, which we have not done in Myanmar and we've not done in Iran, but short of military intervention, sanctions are the only set of tools we have in the toolbox. And they're not perfect and they're not always effective, but there are many other countries which don't agree. I mean, that's the state of the world today. We don't have a general consensus in the world today about how we're going to be able to address these kinds of issues. And that makes it difficult, but it doesn't make it impossible. The fact is sanctions have had more of an impact on Russia than I think Russia ever believed. The military support for Ukraine and the resilience and the technical and professional ability of the Ukrainian military at every level has shocked the Russians, as it should have. And I think it's a revelation to everybody to see to what extent Ukraine has been able to turn what Russia thought would be a 3-day blitzkrieg into a major ongoing war, which in my view, Russia cannot be allowed to win.
I want to take you back, I guess, a few weeks. You made a speech at the United Nations and you brandished your charter. And boy, oh boy, that thing got a lot of pickup on social media. There were a lot of people who either emailed me or called me or whatever and said, you know, go Bob, go. He's speaking for us. I want to, and you got out, if I can say this, you got out a little ahead of the government of Canada in calling evil what it is. And I want to know whether you had any brushback from the Prime Minister's office or Foreign Affairs Canada, Global Affairs Canada, that you might be just a little ahead of where our politicians wanted us to be at that moment.
Not at all. I've had nothing but support from the government of Canada and nothing but support from Global Affairs Canada, from the ministers, from the Minister of Defense, from Minister Joly, from Minister Sajjan in Development, who I've met with a couple of times. The Prime Minister personally has been extremely supportive, personally to me. He's phoned me, he's talked to me. We're in regular contact, and he's very supportive. I mean, I'm chuckling because you might think that would be what would happen, but not at all. I think, in fact, and I've had nothing but positive reaction from many of my fellow diplomats in the Canadian Foreign Service. I've had very positive comments from my colleagues in different capitals, most of them professional diplomats, and they just say you're doing a wonderful job in using the UN, which is what it should be used for, which is a platform to explain to the world and to explain to Canadians what's going on, what we're doing, how we're doing it, why we're doing it, and using public diplomacy for what it should be used for, as well as private diplomacy. And of course, public diplomacy involves using social media and other ways of communicating, and I do that. And I don't feel any sense that my leash is being pulled or that I'm being muzzled, or quite the opposite. I don't even this interview, Steve. I don't, as you, in contrast to some of your other people on your program, I don't have notes. I don't have briefers telling me don't say this, say that. I just do the programs and I just talk. And at the age of 73, I think I know what I'm doing. And the Prime Minister has demonstrated nothing but confidence in what I'm doing. And I'm delighted that he is.
Let me ask you one more question. And admittedly, this is a bit of a touchy-feely one. But 50 years ago, your dad had the job you now have. I wonder, when you're out there doing your work today, how often you think of him?
Every day.
Is it helpful?
Always. I mean, you can see you always do this to me, Steve. You manage to touch a chord that kind of gets me. But as you know, my dad was born in Hamilton.
I sure do know.
I
think on New Year's Eve, actually.
That's an additional connection that you and I have together, and there are many others. But no, my dad was a career diplomat who cared a lot about Canada and was a very lucky guy. He came from a very poor family and got a scholarship to U of T, and then a scholarship to go to the LSE, and then a scholarship to go to Oxford. He's a very successful guy academically and everything. And when the war broke out, he went into the Foreign Service, and that was his life. So for him, being able to serve at the UN in Geneva and then in New York was a wonderful opportunity. And I know that, I went to high school in Geneva. I went to international school. I know that many people thought I was an awkward fit to be the leader of the New Democrats in Ontario. But there you go. It worked out in a way that I was allowed for us to form a government. We can debate that on another occasion, as Mr. Davis would have said. And then to come here, to come full circle, has been a wonderful opportunity. And I think of him and my mother a lot. And it's very meaningful because there's a lot of history that I have in my head that I can relate to people to say, we've been through this before. This is what happened before. And people look at me and say, how do you know that? I said, I just know it. I know what happened. It's part of my story, part of who I am. So I feel that I can do this job with great confidence and with great affection, with the thinking of my mom and dad and thinking of what they stood for, what they went through in their lives, going through World War II and coming through the Depression and all that greatest, Tom Brokaw called them the greatest generation. They were a remarkable generation. So for me to be able to follow, if you like, in his footsteps, and those who know me will know that there were some times when I fought back against doing that, and now finally kind of come around to the conclusion that this is what makes sense for me. So I'm very proud to be able to do it as a Canadian.
Well, as I guess they said to President Truman 70 or 80 years ago, give him hell, Harry, okay? Keep doing it.
I'm giving him hell. They call me Hurricane Bob here.
Good. All right. Ambassador, I know how crazy your time is these days, so we're grateful you could spare some time for us on TVO tonight. Thank you and be well.
Very glad to do it. Nice to talk to you.
Probably every parent of kids born since the advent of the internet has asked a version of this question. How can I keep my kids safe online? Add social media to the mix, and it's even more, not less, complicated. An initiative in the United Kingdom that applies a statutory code of age-appropriate design is drawing some hopeful attention. It was a private member's bill put forward by former filmmaker Baroness Kidron, now a member of the British House of Lords. She is founder and chair of the Five Rights Foundation, a nonprofit organization working for the protection of children and youth online. And Baroness Kidron joins us now from our nation's capital. We've never had a baroness on this program before. That's just terrific. So nice to meet you. How you doing?
I'm doing great, and I'm absolutely delighted to be here and to be your first baroness.
Indeed, this is an historic occasion. Well, let's start with this. What brings you over the pond to our nation's capital?
So I was invited by some of your parliamentarians to come and talk to them about child online safety, and in particular the age-appropriate design code, which is a system of safety by design for kids that we've introduced in the UK. And as you said in your introduction, it's causing quite a stir because world want that for their kids in their jurisdictions, and that includes some of your politicians here in Ottawa.
When you tried to employ what you're doing in the UK, what kind of pushback did you initially run into?
So I am old enough to have actually experienced the moment in which the industry said two-factor authentication would break the internet, or the right to be forgotten, or GDPR, and so they did say that the age-appropriate design code would break the internet. But I'm really happy to say that it's still thriving, and it has actually passed into law. And the tech companies have done some really creative and positive moves to actually meet the regulation. So I think it's a good day for kids, good day for families, that actually once the law came into being, they did some fabulous things. And for example, Google has Safe Search as a default for under 18s, and TikTok turned off notifications through the nights for people under 15 at 9 o'clock, for those under 17 at 10 o'clock, and Instagram and TikTok stopped introducing algorithmically strange adults to children. And this is all just very basic product safety, but they are doing it at scale, and they are doing it globally.
They're doing it, but can I say, is it fair for me to say they wouldn't be doing it had you not shamed them into it?
I'm not sure I would use those words, but I am a believer in regulation. I think that we've had a decade or more where they have known that children are struggling and that they're sort of the idea of an internet where all users are equal actually means that they're treating children as if they were adult. And I think that that's just simply not fair. It doesn't take account of development needs and life experience. And we see it in our homes, in our schools, and actually, sadly, in our hospitals. You know, we see kids are struggling. So I say they've had at least a decade to do this as a matter of corporate responsibility. Now we have to make it law. And absolutely, they have made these massive changes in relation to this law. So I'm afraid the evidence speaks for itself.
All right. Is this to say then that all current and future digital services ought to be designed with the notion that kids may use this in mind?
Well, exactly. I think the thing is that if I have one mission, it's to get everybody in the cycle, and whether it is actually the regulator, the politician, or indeed the product designer or the distributor, marketer, to answer this question. What would you do differently if you knew for certain the end user was a child? Yeah? And if you can answer that question in good faith, that is the digital world that children deserve. Yeah? And I think that what we're going to see is that demographic get a sort of a safety by design, a product design that takes account of their age as well as their circumstance. And I think that that's a really positive thing, because I do want to stress to your listeners, you know, I'm tech positive. I was an early adopter. I have one of the earliest webcams on sale somewhere in a cupboard in my room. I like this stuff, but it has to be fairer, kinder, more equitable, and it must be safe for kids.
Why, do you have a theory as to why the industry seems to not have had this in mind for as long as it has been in business?
I think in the beginning it was sort of part of something actually bizarrely noble. You know, this idea of equity, you know, it's going to be democratizing. It was going to have no gatekeepers. Everyone has an equal say. But that sort of concept of equality is really just, it just doesn't work when you come to kids. You know, the concept of treating everyone equal as a utopian outcome means you treat a child as if they're an adult. And then there's a lot of decisions that children are not enabled to make. And there's a lot of the discourse and a development of a very commercial, commodifying net that is not suitable for childhood. So I think in the first place, it grew out of a good place. But where I think you absolutely can point at industry and say, you know, they also didn't expect to get so big. They also didn't expect to be so powerful. They also didn't expect to be so rich. And when those things came into play, they also knew of the risks to children, and they didn't account for it. And they have been slow. Yeah. In fact, immorally slow to act on the information they have. And that's where the law comes in.
Well, maybe we should just spell that out a little bit, because obviously anybody who's got kids and knows how difficult it is to keep them from living on their phones 24/7, they'll get this. But if you don't have kids or nieces or nephews or whatever, maybe spell out what are some of the ramifications that you're or consequences that you're trying to avoid by having an age-appropriate design code in place.
Yeah. So I think the easiest way of looking at it is first of all, you know, the tech sector has traditionally treated anyone over the age of 13 as an adult. And that simply isn't right. Yeah, any parent, anybody who's ever been a child knows that they're not fully formed. And so the code actually raises the age from 13 to 18 and says, anybody in that age group deserves protections. And I make this point that most kids who come to harm are between the age of 15 and 18, and they come to harm between 10 and 12 at night. So, we know that we need to deal with teenagers. The second thing is that traditionally, the sector has only dealt with children on sites that are directed at children. So, and again, children aren't only where you want them to be. They're all over the internet, and that doesn't include things like TikTok and Facebook and Instagram and all those places. So we've introduced in the code the concept of likely to be accessed. So any service likely to be accessed by a child must put in these protections for their child users. And that is really radical and has reformed who's in scope of considering their child users. And then the last thing is that it's by design and by default. So none of the complicated, tools and controls, and 3 buttons later you can put up a privacy thing that then disappears when you log in. It has to be by design and default. And the sorts of things that we're looking at are, how about GPS? Yeah, the code says you must have GPS off by default so that actually people can't see where a child is in real time unless there is a purpose for that. And that came out of a very specific interaction that we were having a problem with kids who were being traced and picked up from their real life location. Now, if you ask anybody in the world, is it a really great idea to show the real life location of a kid? Yeah, you wouldn't believe that it was actually normal in the tech sector to do that. Exactly the same with algorithmic recommendations of friends. Yeah, if you algorithmically recommend people on the basis of geography, you might be introducing a stranger adult to a child who's nearby. That's not properly safe, and so on and so forth. So there's a series of very specific outcomes that the code guards against. And where I will give some credit to the sector is having pushed back at having any kind of regulation. When we finally got it passed, they were really quite creative about some of the things they did. And as well as taking out some of these features, they've also added in some really nice things about timeout and making sure that there's wellness assets, education, better terms and conditions, and all sorts of things, that each one of which makes a child's online life that little bit better.
Was there one thing in particular that you think happened, or one argument in particular that you made to the tech companies that finally got them to see the light on this?
That's such a great question. I think the truthful answer to that question was, I can get Parliament to agree with me, and therefore this will be in law, so you have no choice. That is the argument that they finally heard. I think that in another context, I've had a lot of conversations about the details of children's experience, and I work very closely with a very large group of children over a number of years to make sure that I'm capturing their lived experience. And some of the more nuanced and fun things, like, for example, YouTube turned off autoplay for under 18s. That was something that kids really said loud and clear. If you play the next video, I'm just going to watch it. So please don't make it automatically. If I want to choose to play another video, I will do so. And something like that doesn't seem to be a huge safety issue, but actually, that sort of sense of addiction, the sense of your nose to the grindstone, that feeling that parents kind of have that their kids actually are addicted to their devices rather than have some agency to go find the things they want to engage with, is really a subtext of everything. And having breaks in the system, as the code insists upon, and having some features turned off so that kids have more choice, has been really, really profound for the lived experience of kids. And I would make this point, is that actually a lot of the things that are difficult for kids are not intrinsically bad. It's actually just this sort of pushing and nudging of their experience. But also, if they are very addicted and if it's normal to always respond, and if it's always on, when bad things happen, they actually don't have the wherewithal to get out. So there is a sort of a safety thing, even about making it a little bit less toxic in the first place.
Right. Now, you did tell us earlier that the key ages for young people seem to be between 15 and 18 when they are at potential of being in most danger and with highest kinds of consequences here. But, you know, how do I say this so I don't sound like an old fogey here? Kids lie all the time, right? You're supposed to be a certain age. You have to have reached a certain age before the tech companies legally can give you an account, but kids lie and they say that they're older than they really are. And you know, how do you deal with that kind of thing?
Okay, it's a really good point, and I think there's a couple of things. First of all, you know, it is significant that for commercial purposes, the companies know exactly how old the kids are. So, you know, if you think about age-appropriate advertising and targeting children with, you know, with games or sweet shop or even educational assets, you can see we've done research at Five Rights that shows, that they're targeting kids according to age. But actually, when it comes to self-harm, pornography, you know, body dysmorphic images, you know, extreme diets, and even in one case, invitations to end it all, they're sending those same kids' accounts that material. So I think a lot of the argument about age is a false argument. There are many technologies now that help you sort age. I have on my computer something that from one sentence of voice can tell my age within 6 months. Yeah, there's a lot of possibilities of judging age. The problem for the tech sector is if they know they're dealing with a kid, the responsibilities that flow from that. So first of all, I'd say they does protest too much about age and about who's lying and who's not gauging age. I think the second thing, and this is a really crucial thing, is that if you speak to any child development expert, they will say that transgressing is a part of childhood. So it's more important that we put a little bump in the road, and the child knows that they are actually transgressing. They know they're in an adult place. They know they've got around the system, and they're looking over the head, you know, over their shoulder a little bit, knowing they're not in a space, but that is designed for them. Whereas now we're seeing that the age at which kids have pornography thrust in their hands, for example, between 8 and 12, and we're saying it's normal. They didn't even look for it. You know, 60% of access to porn is unintentional, Or if a child who is 13 is allowed, because the company has said they are now adult, to access, you know, self-harm and these extreme diets, that we're saying this is normal. This is what society thinks you should be accessing. So I think that you know, yes, some kids will lie. I think that actually if it's giving them access to a fairer and better and kinder internet, for the most part, they will actually want that. And they often say that to me. What they don't want to be is cut off from their friends. Right. But they do actually want a slightly less toxic environment. But even for those who lie, let them know they're transgressing, and let them know they're in an adult space, and that will be a healthier thing for them. You know,
it's one thing, Baroness, for I mean, you got this bill through Parliament, and congratulations, and you know, you've now got these regulations in place. It's one thing to do that. It's another thing to then actually follow up on enforcement of the companies responsible for having to do all of this. Who's monitoring the monitors, as it were?
Yeah, it's a good question. So in the UK, the data protection regulator, the ICO, they're called, Information Commissioner, is responsible. And in fact, as we speak, they have 46 inquiries going out against the code. I myself have made a number of complaints, and many third sector organizations, charities, children's rights organizations, some of the data democracy organizations are also looking into forcing some action. Now, I must say that I personally am more interested in compliance than punishment. So I always urge the companies to do the right thing and meet the code with, fulsomely. Mm-hmm. But I do not step back from forcing them to do so. And I think what's really interesting is that the code was then reproduced in Ireland, and they can also take some action against it. And it is now been introduced in California on a bipartisan basis with a Republican and a Democrat assembly members. And it will be heard on the 19th of April in California for the first test of perhaps having a California code. And I think this is the way forward. And I'm hoping that Canada embraces the code. And any parents who are listening, please write to your representative and ask them to do so, because actually we could make this a global norm if there's enough people and places and jurisdictions that can actually force compliance, because the UK cannot police the world for children. I don't know if you know this, but there are nearly 1 billion children online around the globe. It's 1 in 3 users. This is not a small matter. This is not a small demographic, and it's absolutely central to how they grow up as human beings, as citizens, and how they feel about themselves inside. And we've got to put this kid-centric idea of the digital world we want really at the front of our political and societal concerns. That's really, really important. And so I hope California will come through, and I hope that Canada will follow shortly.
And when people approach you, for example, when you testify at a parliamentary committee, it may well be that somebody says to you, I'm worried about the free speech implications, or I'm worried about freedom, or I'm worried about a nanny state getting too involved in people's lives. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, it's really easy. And I want to say 2 things. First of all, I consider myself a privacy campaigner. I brought in data privacy legislation, and I consider myself a free speech advocate. But this is not about either of those things. This is about product safety. Yeah, we're talking about consumer-facing products used by children. And the image that I always say to my fellow politicians is, there's a car, it has no brakes, it has no rear view mirror, it has no airbag, it's on the top of a hill, and there's a kid at the wheel. Now, that's not about freedom of speech. That's actually about basic responsibility about keeping kids safe. And equally, data protection and the age-appropriate design code, it's the only content element says you may not use a child's own data to profile them, to offer them detrimental material. Mm-hmm. Yeah? So it doesn't say you can't offer them. If a child goes for the first time and looks for something detrimental, they can, yeah? But you cannot then loop them in to a series of deeper and deeper and deeper and more aggressive and intrusive pieces of information based on that search history. And it's worth saying to your listeners, on certain platforms, a kid doesn't even have to click on something. If they even just hover, if they hesitate, it changes the algorithm and it serves them more. This is not about freedom of speech. This is actually about the commercial need of those companies to drag our children's attention towards them, actually need some boundaries. And they have to, like every other sector, have a sort of a product safety regime which says, here's the minimum standard. You cannot abuse or exploit children to that degree.
Well, as you've no doubt discovered, politics is the art of the possible, and as our parliamentarians consider what's possible on this front, it probably is instructive to find out how long it took you from your initial attempts to finally having this in place. How long did it take to do it all?
I've been working in this area for 10 years, and it's not the only thing I've done. But the code itself, from the moment that I thought of it to the moment that it actually passed into law, because there was a year of transition as well as the actual creation of it, was nearly 4 years. It was 3.5, 4 years. I would say that Canada's in a really interesting spot. You have an online harms bill that you're considering. You're having some data regulation, I think, is on the books. And that's the perfect place to insert data protection and privacy for children. And because we've done it already, I would hope that it would be much quicker here in Canada with a fair wind. And perhaps it's worth me saying, I am a crossbench peer. I am not politically aligned. And everywhere I travel in the world, and I do travel quite a lot, South America, North America, Africa, Europe, England, Australia, this is a bipartisan issue. There is no division on ideological grounds. It is a Conservative government in the UK that passed this into law. It had the full support of the Liberal and Labour parties and indeed all the independents. And I think that we must understand this and rise above the things that sink bills, for political reasons, and say, actually, we have a big responsibility, a duty of care to our kids, and here is a step forward. And perhaps I could also say, nothing's going to make the internet 100% safe. Life is not 100% safe. This is just very basic product safety. It's like building regs for the infrastructure of the digital world. And we really, really need to put it in place if we're going to let kids play in that house.
I have two things left to do, which is, number one, mention to people that we have a podcast here at TVO called Screen Time, and you were kind enough to be a guest on that podcast, so if people want more information on this, they can visit that. There are 5 episodes up right now of that podcast. And the other thing is simply to thank you for spending so much time with us here on TVO tonight. It's been great to meet you, and good luck with the committee and all of our parliamentarians.
Thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure.
Whether you receive the CERB or business grants or some other variation of pandemic relief, as the May 2nd deadline to file your taxes approaches, you may be wondering what pitfalls could await you. Jackie Porter is a certified financial planner at Cart Wealth Management, and she joins us now from the provincial capital to help pave the way. Jackie, it's good to see you again. How are you doing?
I am great. Thanks, Steve. It's great to be here.
Great to have you back. Now, during the first couple of years of the pandemic, there were various deductions that people could take advantage of to lower their tax burden. Anything new this year we ought to know about?
I think probably the big one is that for parents who have had a lot of childcare disruptions, they are actually going to get an extra 20% on top of what they would normally claim for childcare expenses. Of course, this is all dependent on your income, but you do get that extra 20%, and I think that's a step in the right direction for Canadians.
Now, I bet a lot of people didn't know about this, and I bet there are other deductions that people are eligible for that they also don't know about, such as maybe.
Yeah, I think another 2 that I'm going to mention, because again, they're kind of, pandemic related. Obviously people are spending much more time in their homes, and that includes seniors. And I think for a lot of seniors who might have spent less time at home before, they might have found out their home could use some extra help being safer for them. So the government introduced something called the Seniors Home Safety Tax Credit, which will give seniors up to 25% of a tax credit to a maximum of $10,000 to make their home safer, get rid of some of those maybe scatter rugs, things that they could really hurt themselves on. And that would also apply to a caregiver as well. The other one that I think would be great to mention here is the jobs training credit for people who've been disrupted with job loss during the pandemic. They'll get actually up to $2,000. They get a credit for 50%, up to a maximum of $2,000 to get new training, to get work in a new field, or just really to improve their skills as they go job hunting.
Okay.
As we go through the recovery.
How about if you are accustomed to working in an office, but then you've discovered over the past couple of years that you've been spending a lot of time working out of your home? Any deductions available there?
Yes, and yours truly is in that situation as well, Steve, so I get that. So if you're an employee, the good news is this year you're going to actually get an extra $100. So the credit went from $400 to $500 for any office-related, expenses that you might have. So that's good news as well.
And anybody eligible for that?
Yeah, any employee who's been working from home throughout the pandemic is eligible for this up to $500 tax credit.
Gotcha. Okay, we know the pandemic has led to many women leaving the workforce. Households that used to have two incomes, many of them are now down to one income. Is there a way for couples who are in that situation to reduce their tax burden?
Yeah, and I think this is a really important issue to highlight, Steve, because I think often people are making tax decisions or planning to file their taxes without talking as a family, working together as a family, and tax planning as a family. So if you were somebody who was the lower income spouse that might have been making the RSP contribution, and you might be losing out money for that family. So consider talking to your partner, who's the person who's now the breadwinner working from home. If you're planning on doing things like making an RSP contribution, then it may still be worthwhile for you to give that money that you would have normally made the contribution with to your higher income earning spouse, so that you can get back more tax refund as a family, not just as an individual. So I think talking as a couple, seeing, who should be making that childcare expense, who should be making the RSP contribution, and really doing more family versus doing tax planning as an individual is going to be the biggest takeaway, I think, for families coming, as we recover again from the pandemic, and we're looking to keep more money in our pocket as Canadians.
Well, since you raised the issue of RSPs, there are a number of different vehicles, I guess, that people who are lucky enough to have some disposable income ought to be considering right now. The retirement savings plan is one. I guess the tax-free savings account is another. In the last federal budget, they've come out, the feds did, with some kind of home ownership for first-time home buyers, a savings plan for them. What's your advice on where people ought to put that money?
It goes back to what we were talking about before. It all depends on income. And that's why it's so important to say who's earning what and who would benefit, how would we benefit most as a family from, these tax strategies. So it's the same when we're talking about these different tax vehicles. What type of income do you earn? If you're a higher income earner, earning over, say, $65,000, RSPs might make more sense for you. If you're a lower income individual, then you may not get very much benefit out of the RSP contribution. So a tax-free savings account is really where you want to be, because then you grow money tax-free and you also can withdraw it tax-free. Sometimes when people aren't aware of that, they make an RSP contribution, and then when they take it out, they didn't realize they were going to have to pay a tax penalty when they withdraw it. So consider your tax bracket when making contributions to some of these tax products.
And I guess I shouldn't forget, there's not just the new for first-time home buyers tax vehicle as well, tax avoidance vehicle, but they've got registered educational savings plans out there as well. If you want to start saving for post-secondary education from the time a child is very young, what's your recommendation on that kind of vehicle?
Yeah, that's a great one, because Nothing I love more as a financial planner than telling people about free money they can get back from the government. The government will give you up to 20%, up to $2,500 contribution on that RESP, that education plan contribution. So you're literally getting an extra $500 just for making the maximum contribution. And that's going to help, because what we do know is it's getting more and more expensive to fund your child's education. So any help you can get from the government, it's going to take you a little bit further ahead.
Now, Jackie, I'm going to say something shocking here, and that is, I know you love numbers, and I know you love taxes, and I know you love, okay, we get that you're into that space, but a lot of people find the whole process of filing their taxes very distressing, sometimes very overwhelming. I wonder if you have any advice for them.
Oh, my biggest incentive there is the penalty. The penalty is real. It's so real. It's 5% if you don't file your taxes on time, and 1% for each month. So 1% additional for each month that you wait to file. So that's money that you could be using for all of these plans that you have, all the things you want to do for your future. Why give that away to the government? The other thing is, I find it stressful when you wait till the last minute to start dealing with your income taxes. Better to get an accountant, somebody who is a tax advisor versus a tax filer, who can help you make decisions around how you should be dealing with your taxes throughout the year. The worst time in the world to get in contact with a tax advisor is at tax time. So try to avoid that and have these conversations throughout the year so it doesn't end up being this last minute, very stressful thing that you have to deal with. You'll know what you have to pay, and you'll have a plan for how you're going to deal with it. And
just to confirm here, I know there are penalties in place this year. And you just pointed them out, 5% and then the 1% per month. So that's right. Good incentive for us all to get this done on time. But the government did give us a holiday on penalization over the past couple of years, did they not? Or maybe you could help fill in the blanks on that. Oh, yeah, that was only for the first year, and they gave you until September. I think it was September 15th, if I recall correctly. But after that, the government's like, file your taxes. We want our money. So there's unfortunately no holiday this year, folks. You want to get this done on time, and if you need help, reach out to a tax advisor. As I said, sooner rather than later. It's a little bit hectic this time of the year, so it's always better to just have a plan for how you're going to manage it. The excuse of the pandemic can only take us so far, eh? Yeah, the government wants our money now. They do. Yes, indeed. I get it. Jackie, it's always good of you to spend time with us here on TVO. Thanks for your time and all the best. And that is the agenda for Wednesday, April 13th, 2022. The Great Lakes have an important anniversary coming up this week. Tomorrow, we'll assess the bilateral agreement signed 50 years ago that may just have saved the lakes from devastating pollution. I'm Steve Paikin. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at tvo.org, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.